My name is Emma Parker and I am 35. My friends would describe me as the kind of woman who organizes her groceries by color, sends handwritten notes inside birthday cards, and notices the little details most people overlook. I design software that keeps energy grids from collapsing during the intense summer heat in Seattle. I have an affinity for clean code, tidy kitchens, and messy jazz records that spin on lazy Sunday mornings. For almost 3 years, I was involved with Ethan Reed. He is 32, works in marketing for an environmental nonprofit, and can speak at length about the lifespan of a city tree as though it were a beloved pet. We met at a community garden volunteer day. I was there with my company's outreach team, and he was leading a workshop in a faded field jacket with dirt beneath his nails. He was articulate, principled, and undeniably attractive. Our connection wasn't instant, but it was magnetic, like two objects pretending to resist each other before finally snapping into alignment. 6 months later, he moved into my apartment. From the beginning, we had an arrangement, our word for it, stated clearly and repeatedly. I earned more, he had student loans and a job that chose purpose over profit. I paid the rent and most of the bills, he handled groceries, his car, and his role in building an emergency fund for both of us. It felt fair, contemporary, something we could present proudly when friends asked how we made it work. I kept a folder in my top desk drawer labeled Barcelona. It held flight confirmations, a list of tapas bars I wanted to visit, and a folded note card on which, in a moment of ridiculous romantic optimism, I had jotted down ideas for proposing. I had also bookmarked a ring, nothing ostentatious, understated, a stone that caught morning light and reflected it quietly. That Wednesday began like any other. I worked from my home office, the second bedroom that had transformed from a storage closet into a sanctuary. I had noise-canceling headphones, 2 monitors, and a mug resting on a coaster. Ethan was in the living room on a Zoom call with his team. When I stepped into the hallway to ask if he still wanted to join my parents for dinner that weekend, I felt the cool, slightly loose doorknob under my palm. Halfway between my world and his, I heard him in that hushed, private tone reserved for gossip and confessions. God, I hope she doesn't propose. How do you politely reject a woman who pays your rent? Their laughter carried lightly through the air, but even small laughter can cut through walls. I backed into my office, shut the door carefully, and stared at my monitors until the code on the screens bled into white noise. 3 years of memories began reformatting themselves in my mind, the way his affection spiked after I covered an expense, the way he pivoted whenever I brought up the future. Friends he introduced me to became mine, but mine remained mine. I remembered the night he asked to be an authorized user on 2 of my credit cards for emergencies and household expenses. I had said yes, believing trust was built on countless small affirmatives. It turned out trust could also make you collateral. Dinner that evening was ordinary, pasta and a salad with the ends of a cucumber that had seen better days. I laughed at his stories, nodded at his complaints about corporate partners, and noticed the cleanliness of his nails, a detail that seemed insignificant but anchored my mind. In bed, I counted tiny hairline cracks on the ceiling I had never noticed, thought of the Barcelona folder, the open ring tab on my phone, the sticky note that read, "Call jeweler." At 2:13 a.m., I rose and made a list, not groceries, but what to cancel, what to change, what to move, landlord, utilities, bank, cards, parent dinner, cancel, spare key, collect. His name on my credit card portal glowed like a friendly line of text that now meant something else entirely. I did not remove him that night. The practical part of me craved a clean, bloodless exit. Morning came gray and thin. I canceled dinner with my parents, fielded a work call, fixed a bug that had irritated me for a week, and opened the Barcelona folder. The note card felt like another person's handwriting, a diary entry that no longer belonged to me. When he appeared at 5, leaning casually in the office doorway, I said nothing unusual, "Let's cook," while internally observing him with the same detached curiosity one reserves for something once loved but now foreign. Garlic sizzled in the pan. We argued over the right amount of fish sauce. He danced with a spatula. We ate, watched a show, pretended it was just another day. Normal ends quietly. In the bathroom, brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection and almost laughed. I looked exactly like a woman who might have proposed in Barcelona. I turned off the light and kept replaying the Zoom conversation, Jenna's laugh, his whispered words, How do you politely reject a woman who pays your rent? Kindness, it seemed, had been measured, timed, and traded. I lay there, neither crying nor sleeping, but planning. By sunrise, the list was neat, the exit precise. I would leave him exactly what he had given me, an arrangement, this time written by me. Outside, the city shifted into morning. The Barcelona folder, once full of hope, sat sealed, no longer needing opening. Wednesday began like any other. I set up in my home office, the second bedroom I had converted from a storage closet into a workspace. Noise-canceling headphones perched on my ears, 2 monitors humming softly, a mug ring on its coaster. Ethan was in the living room, laptop open, leading a Zoom call with his team. The faint murmur of corporate planning floated from the other side of the door, familiar yet distant. I stood halfway in the hallway, just outside my office, when I heard him. Not the polished voice he used on screen, the one everyone respected, but the quiet, casual tone reserved for gossip and confessions. "God, I hope she doesn't propose," he whispered. "How do you politely reject a woman who pays your rent?" A light laugh followed. Maya Bennett, one of his co-workers, chimed in. "Just marry her and divorce later," she said, a small tinkle of humor that slipped under doors unnoticed. The words hit me like a jolt, detonating before I could even breathe. I froze in the hallway, heart hammering so fast it felt as if it might shatter. I didn't stomp, didn't speak, didn't even clear my throat. I did what I knew best. I went silent. Silence can be misread as peace, but I understood it as strategy. I backed into my office and closed the door with the care one saves for delicate objects, a sleeping baby, or disarming a bomb. I stared at the monitors until the code before me blurred into white noise, a comforting rhythm against the chaos in my chest. 3 years of memories began reformatting themselves. The way his warmth would spike after I covered a big expense, the soft pivots whenever I asked about the future, the subtle ways his friends became mine while mine remained mine. I remembered the night he asked to be added as an authorized user on my credit cards for emergencies and household expenses, and how I had agreed, trusting that trust is built with countless small yes. I realized now how those yes had been collected, like a spreadsheet tracking my generosity against his security. Dinner passed in the usual cadence: pasta, a salad with the ends of a cucumber that had seen better days. He spoke of corporate partners and tree corridors by the freeway, and I nodded, laughed, participated. His nails were clean now, a trivial detail that stuck because it reminded me how quickly my body wanted to flee. In bed that night, I lay counting hairline cracks on the ceiling, thinking of the Barcelona folder, the ring tab left open on my phone, the sticky note on my monitor, "Call jeweler." I imagined sliding the ring onto a finger that would someday tap calculations while asking how to politely reject me. At 2:13 a.m., I slipped out of bed, opened a fresh document, and began a grocery list that wasn't a grocery list. Every item was a step toward dismantling the life we had built together: landlord, utilities, bank, cards, parent dinner, cancel, ask, collect, spare key. I didn't remove him from the accounts yet. I needed precision, a clean break that wouldn't bleed across the carpet. By morning, I canceled dinner with my parents, hid behind work calls, fixed a stubborn bug, smiled when I didn't feel like it. Around noon, I opened the Barcelona folder, traced the note card where I had scribbled proposal ideas, juvenile now, like the diary of someone else's handwriting. When he leaned in the doorway at 5 p.m., casual as ever, asking if we should try the new Thai place or cook, I said, "Let's cook." My voice was dry, strained. We moved through the evening with the ordinary: garlic sautéed, fish sauce measured, a show half-watched, pretending everything was normal. But normal ends quietly. In the bathroom, brushing my teeth, I saw my reflection, a woman who might propose in Barcelona. And instead, I began a plan. A meticulous, deliberate, silent exodus from a relationship that had been built on quiet calculations rather than care. By sunrise, my list was complete, each step accounted for. The Barcelona folder was returned to its drawer, sealed and unnecessary. I had made my strategy: no scenes, no dramatic confrontation, only the careful, precise reclaiming of my life. Evening arrived like a quiet sigh, carrying the residue of the morning's revelation. I followed the motions of ordinary life, stepping into the kitchen with him as if nothing had happened. He chopped garlic while humming some tune I couldn't place, and I stirred the pasta sauce, trying to mimic casual engagement. The light from the kitchen window glinted off the tiles, and for a moment I felt the absurdity of it all, sitting side by side, preparing a meal while my mind was cataloging betrayal. We argued lightly over how much salt was appropriate, or whether the pasta water was at the right temperature, small domestic skirmishes that felt like background noise compared to the echo of what I had heard. He danced a little with the spatula, spinning it like a baton, and I watched, my eyes recording every detail, the way his fingers curled around the handle, the slight lift of his eyebrows when he laughed. Everything was familiar, comforting in a twisted way, and yet, I was simultaneously counting, planning, and dismantling. Dinner passed with the same surface laughter, the same polite conversation about trivial matters, yet I felt the tension like a taut string across my chest. He mentioned the new campaign at work, asked if I had booked the hotel for Barcelona, and I answered with practiced ease. Almost, I said, my voice level. You're the organized one. I'd forget the passport without your reminders. He chuckled, oblivious to the fact that I was memorizing the moment as if storing evidence. Later, after the plates were cleared, the lights dimmed, and the mundane rhythm of evening descended, I found my way to the office. The small room smelled faintly of coffee and paper, a sanctuary where I could act with precision. I opened a blank document and began typing, not a diary, not a letter, but a strategic plan. The list grew: cancel dinner with my parents, reschedule meetings, notify the landlord, close utilities, remove authorized accounts, retrieve spare keys, collect personal items. Each word was deliberate, each line a step in reclaiming my life. I paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard, thinking of his name as it appeared in every portal, in every digital ledger of convenience we had shared. The numbers that once meant nothing now carried weight. Each credit card, each account, each automatic withdrawal had to be reassessed, realigned. I noted the recurring patterns in my mind, the quiet pivot when I asked about our future, the subtle leverage gained through my generosity. I pressed on, removing him from shared accounts, canceling overlapping services, marking deadlines for notifications. The practical part of me craved clean closure, a resolution devoid of emotional spectacle. In the silence, I imagined the smallest details as markers of control: the avocado he never eats, the pen he always leaves uncapped, the precise fold of a napkin. Each of these seemingly insignificant items became part of the inventory of autonomy I was assembling. The room was quiet except for the soft click of keys, the hum of the laptop fan, and my own steady breathing. I was methodical, almost ritualistic, as if the act of listing and organizing could filter out the betrayal itself. By the time midnight pressed against the city, I had outlined every necessary step. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Not in anger, but in careful recognition. I was constructing an exit that would be precise, undeniable, and entirely mine. This was the plan of someone who had loved carefully, and now needed to unlove strategically. The folder with Barcelona flights, the ring bookmarked months ago, the sticky notes reminding me to call the jeweler, all of it lay in the background of my mind, its weight transformed into deliberate, measurable action. I closed the document and leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath me. Outside, the city carried on, unaware of the meticulous unraveling happening within this small apartment. He was still in the living room, his laughter drifting faintly from a show we would later pretend to watch together. I watched, silent, detached, knowing that the evening had not ended in chaos because I was no longer allowing it to end in chaos. The plan was written, the path clear, and for the first time since overhearing him, I felt the calm precision of someone reclaiming their life. The morning arrived thin and gray, a light that felt borrowed from someone else's world. I moved quietly, careful not to disturb him, the way I had learned to navigate our shared space without making a ripple. The note I had scribbled in the kitchen last night sat heavy in my mind, though its words were still folded inside me, unspoken. I opened my laptop first, coffee brewing untouched beside me, and began mapping everything that tied us together. Banks, utilities, subscriptions, all lines of code and numbers that had once felt neutral now pulsed with intent. My fingers hovered over each interface like I was defusing a device, the sort of meticulous calm I only ever reserved for work deadlines. By 6:30, I had started executing the plan. The first message was to postpone dinner with my parents. Hey, work emergency. Can we move dinner to next weekend? I hit send and felt a flicker of the irony, my own voice carrying a polite lie over the line. Next, I called the bank to remove him as an authorized user from our joint accounts. My tone was measured, almost ceremonial, as if I were reading a script I had written for myself. Yes, expedited replacement cards, please. The agent confirmed the updates, unaware that she had just signed off on a quiet severing of ties. One by one, I moved through the utilities, electric, water, internet, and explained that the changes were due to a personal separation. Each thank you felt like a small hammer striking a final nail in our shared history. He finally emerged from the bedroom around 9, hair wild from sleep, wearing one of my old sweaters, the one that always made him look like he belonged. "You're up early," he said, smiling as though the day had no weight beyond caffeine and sunlight. I only nodded, fingers busy scrolling through the budgeting app one had reinstalled solely for this purpose. The line that once glowed with our shared emergency fund now read like a ledger of debts I had never agreed to bear. It was his, but no longer mine. Every transaction, every account, every line of code in our financial life had become a record of control disguised as love. I deleted the joint apps, removed shared access, and logged each change with deliberate precision. By the time he settled at the kitchen table with a mug, pretending to read his morning emails, I was already several steps ahead, my mind calculating the remaining actions like a chessboard with only one possible checkmate. I did not glance at him. He did not ask. We shared the same space, but the invisible line had been drawn. In the quiet between his first sip of coffee and my final keystroke, I realized how mechanical my motions had become. Every movement was deliberate, almost surgical, but beneath it all ran a river of muted rage, tempered by resolve. I wasn't just canceling accounts, I was reclaiming myself from the architecture of our years together. This wasn't chaos. It was the order I had learned to command at work, applied to my personal life with the same precision. And in that order, in that deliberate severing of convenience and false trust, I found a strange kind of clarity. By the time the city outside roused itself into its usual clamor, I had removed him from every financial pathway I controlled. The house still smelled faintly of his cologne and last night's cooking, but it no longer carried the weight of joint ownership. He lingered at the table, unaware, humming softly as he scrolled, and I watched from my office doorway, the cold, quiet satisfaction of having taken the first step toward freedom settling in like a tangible presence. I had survived the whisper, the betrayal, and the invisible ledger. The day had begun, but for the first time in months, it began for me alone. The morning light filtered through the blinds, painting the office in sharp lines, and I finally let myself exhale. The small victories of the morning, cards cancelled, bills reassigned, keys quietly reclaimed, felt like steps into a new reality, but the weight of what I had overheard lingered. I knew I couldn't navigate this alone, not yet. My hands hovered over the phone, hesitating for only a second before dialing the one person I trusted to hear everything without judgment. Olivia answered on the second ring, her familiar warmth flowing through the line. "Emma? Everything okay?" Her voice was a tether, steady and calm, exactly what I needed. I swallowed hard and let the words spill, the whisper of betrayal, the shock, the slow unraveling of years. She didn't interrupt, didn't question. She simply held the space for me, and that was enough. I don't know where to start," I admitted. My voice trembled despite my best effort at control. Olivia laughed softly, the sound carrying reassurance. "Start anywhere. I've got you. No judgment, no advice unless you ask. Just me." We spoke for what felt like hours, though time was irrelevant. Each sentence I released eased the tight coil in my chest. She reminded me that the silence I had chosen wasn't weakness, it was strategy. That taking care of myself wasn't selfish. That my clarity, my safety, and my sense of self mattered more than anyone else's narrative. By mid-afternoon, I realized I hadn't felt this safe in days. The fear, the disbelief, the quiet fury, it all softened in the presence of her calm. Olivia suggested I stay over, just for the night, to rest without the constant vigilance that had marked the past few days. Without hesitation, I agreed. Her apartment smelled like brewed coffee and old books, a comforting mix that grounded me the moment I stepped in. I sank into her couch, shedding the armor I had worn all morning. The world outside continued, indifferent, but here I could pause, breathe, and be simply Emma. No spreadsheets, no hidden agendas, no calculations of worth measured in savings or rent. Just the quiet certainty of being understood. We didn't need to speak constantly, silence was companionable. She brought me tea, wrapped a soft blanket around my shoulders, and handed me a notebook, a small gesture that somehow said, record, reflect, release. I spent the evening writing, emptying my mind, cataloging the facts instead of the emotions, creating a repository of clarity rather than resentment. For the first time in what felt like weeks, I slept through the night. The tremor in my chest settled into a slow, even rhythm. I woke to sunlight spilling across the floor, realizing that for the first time since the whispered conversation I had overheard, I felt a sense of normalcy, fragile but real. The apartment hummed softly with the quiet life of Olivia's home, and I let myself sink into it, knowing that tomorrow I would take the next steps forward, but tonight, I could simply exist. Being with Olivia reminded me that support wasn't about fixing things for me, it was about holding the space where I could fix myself. And that, I realized, was the most radical, liberating thing of all. The morning after staying at Olivia's, I felt a quiet that was almost alien, a space to breathe without the constant tightness in my chest. My phone buzzed with a new message request, from Maya Bennett. The subject line simply read, "Please read this." My fingers hovered for a moment, heart thudding. I tapped it open. "Hi, Emma. I feel terrible." I didn't realize how serious he was that day. It was supposed to be a joke, but he told everyone at work that you ghosted him and left him with rent due. I couldn't stay silent after what I discovered. "Call me if you want context." I stared at the number for a long moment before dialing. Maya's voice trembled slightly when she answered. "Emma, thank you for calling. I know this is awkward, but I need you to know what he's been saying at work." I let her speak. She explained how Adrian, that morning at the office, presented a story painting me as someone who abandoned him out of nowhere. "He told people you were controlling with money," Maya continued. "That you used finances to manipulate him." I almost laughed, the audacity almost amusing if it weren't so familiar. But then she added something that froze me in place. "There's more. He's done this before." "Before?" I repeated, disbelieving. "Yes," she said carefully. "One of his exes, Hannah Lee, worked here years ago. Same pattern. He moved in with her, let her cover most expenses, said it was temporary until he got stable, then left once he had what he wanted. He even bragged about it, how he learned to manage relationships strategically. That's why he keeps spreadsheets now. Names, dates, savings targets, exit plans." My chest tightened. "Spreadsheet?" "Yes," Maya said. "I saw it once by accident. He joked it was his freedom plan. I thought it was ironic. But the details are real." The line went silent. My heart pounded. "Do you still have her contact info?" "I think so. I'll send it to you," Maya replied. 10 minutes later, a message appeared, "Hannah Lee, freelance designer." I texted her, not expecting a response. She answered almost immediately. "You're Emma? I wondered when you'd find me." We met at a small cafe downtown. Hannah was calm, deliberate, with the quiet air of someone who had rebuilt herself before. Sliding her phone across the table, she showed me a spreadsheet, columns listing relationship timelines, projected expenses covered by the partner, personal savings growth, and then, chillingly, the exit window. And there it was, my name. Next to it, a number, 25,000. I stared until the numbers blurred. "He updated it periodically," she explained. While I thought he was focused on work projects, it had been this all along, a ledger of his manipulations. "You're not the first," she said softly, "but you can be the last." That night, back at Olivia's, I opened a new folder on my laptop. I named it Mute History. Inside, I saved screenshots of the spreadsheet, Maya's messages, Hannah's notes, everything that proved I hadn't imagined the betrayal. For the first time, I didn't feel naive. I felt documented, aware, and quietly resolute. The knock at the door made my chest tighten. He stood there, a hesitant figure, holding a small bouquet that looked more like an afterthought than an apology. I didn't step back, didn't flinch. This was the moment I had prepared for. "Can we talk?" he started, his voice carefully measured, as if rehearsed. I opened the door fully, keeping my arms crossed. "About what?" I asked, calm but firm. He shifted, searching for words. "I know you've seen the messages, but..." "Don't," I interrupted, holding up my phone. Screenshots, messages, spreadsheets, all evidence neatly collected. I let the silence hang, letting the weight of truth settle in. His eyes flicked to the phone, a microsecond of panic crossing his face. You saw the spreadsheet? I nodded. Yes. And there's a line with my name next to 30,000. Care to explain that? He swallowed. It wasn't about money, not really. I was trying to protect myself. I've been unstable before. I thought if I could rely on someone like you, I'd feel safe. I held his gaze, steady. You used me for stability. You called it partnership. But it was a plan, a calculation. His shoulders slumped slightly. I panicked. I didn't want to feel trapped. I thought I needed security, and you had it. And you chose to measure love in numbers, I said softly. That's not love. He hesitated, looking for a crack, a chance to change my mind. There was none. I had done my work, collected the facts, and prepared myself. We're finished, I said, definitive. No dramatics, no shouting, just clarity. He nodded, eyes glassy, and for the first time I felt the air shift. Freedom settled over me quietly. He muttered something about regret, but I didn't answer. Walking away, I felt neither anger nor pity. Just the certainty that this chapter had ended. Later, I found his final text waiting, "You'll miss me. No one else will give what you do." I read it once and deleted it. If he was right about one thing, it was only that I would give carefully from now on. The door clicked behind him, and for the first time in weeks, my apartment felt lighter. I didn't mourn the relationship, I acknowledged it, folded it into memory, and moved forward. The morning after the confrontation felt heavier than any previous dawn. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of untouched coffee in front of me, and opened my laptop to review every financial statement, every transaction tied to our shared life. Numbers that had once seemed abstract now carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. The total, laid bare, was $70,000. A sum that represented more than money. It was the real cost of trust misplaced, of love miscalculated, of years silently invested in someone who had never truly met me halfway. I spent hours reconciling accounts, closing joint payments, and redirecting obligations that had been artificially intertwined with him. Each click of the mouse, each form filled, felt like a stitch in the fraying fabric of my independence being sewn back together. It was methodical, deliberate work, and in the quiet of my apartment, it felt empowering. Control, long deferred, was slowly returning to my hands. Messages arrived, the familiar ping of his name lighting up my screen. He reached out again, likely trying to justify, persuade, or provoke a response. I read each one once, the words bouncing off me, hollow and irrelevant. No reply came. My boundaries were firm, my autonomy non-negotiable. The world felt slightly lighter without his influence dictating the tempo of my day. By late afternoon, I turned to the small collection of personal items he had left behind. Among them was the ring, the one that had symbolized a promise, a future, a shared dream. Holding it in my palm, I felt the weight of its meaning, and then the relief of release. I placed it in an envelope, addressed it to an organization supporting young women in STEM, imagining it sparking confidence and opportunity for someone who would value it more than the deceit it had once represented. It was symbolic, yes, but deeply necessary. The evening brought a quiet sense of closure. I brewed tea, opened a book I had set aside for months, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to sit without the undercurrent of tension, without weighing each word and action of another person against my own heart. The apartment smelled faintly of jasmine from the candle I had lit, a small ritual for reclaiming space and time that belonged solely to me. There was no fanfare, no dramatic announcement, only the gradual, steady reweaving of my life into a pattern of my own design. Each small decision, paying bills, answering emails, choosing what to eat, was now a stitch in a tapestry of self-determination. I felt the accumulation of months of restraint and hesitation unraveling, replaced by clarity and purpose. As night settled, I reflected on the lessons hidden within the upheaval. Trust must be earned, boundaries must be respected, and independence, once compromised, can always be regained with care and intention. This was not the end of my story, merely a decisive chapter in which I reclaimed my agency. Tomorrow would bring routine, responsibility, and perhaps new beginnings, but tonight, it was enough to simply breathe and acknowledge that I had survived, and emerged intact. The boxes were stacked by the doorway, half-packed, the scent of fresh paint still lingering in the new apartment. I traced the outline of the living room, imagining where each piece of furniture would go, but also feeling the emptiness that came with freedom. Seattle's streets hummed faintly below, a reminder that life moved on even if I had paused for months in the shadow of betrayal. I had left the past behind, or at least, I had taken the first decisive step to separate it from my present. The apartment was smaller than the last, but the space felt like mine, every corner a canvas for my choices, every shelf a testament to my independence. I placed my laptop on the desk near the window and paused, noticing the sunlight cutting across the hardwood floors. For the first time in a long while, I didn't need to coordinate with anyone else, I didn't need to anticipate anyone else's whims or desires. I was accountable only to myself, a thought that both exhilarated and terrified me. But the fear was tempered by clarity that came from finally understanding that my past efforts, my trust, and my care had not been wasted, they had been lessons. I unpacked slowly, taking out the folder labeled Barcelona. It had been a repository of memories, of plans, of what-ifs. I sat by the window, turning it over in my hands, and felt the weight of it as both precious and painful. Then, carefully, I transformed the folder into a paper crane, folding each crease with intention. The crane perched on the windowsill, catching the light, its wings delicate but determined. It wasn't just a figure of origami, it was a symbol, a declaration that my past did not dictate my future. The plane of memory was acknowledged, but it no longer constrained me. I wandered through the apartment, letting my senses absorb the newness, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the floorboards, the faint fragrance of my favorite candle. These were ordinary things, yet they were mine, unshared and unmediated. I allowed myself to breathe fully, to settle into the understanding that peace was not granted by circumstances or relationships, but carved from patience, self-respect, and the willingness to reclaim my space. It was the first lesson in the curriculum of my life rewritten. The memories of him, the promises, the smiles, the manipulations, were present as facts, no longer as emotional anchors. I acknowledged the years without resentment, because anger was an unnecessary weight, a detour from the path I was now walking. I looked out at the city skyline, at the rain-soaked streets reflecting neon signs, and realized that love, real love, had never been the expenditure of self for another's benefit. It was the attentiveness to boundaries, the courage to protect oneself, the ability to honor one's own heart. I began to arrange the remaining personal items, a few books, the carefully curated kitchenware, photographs of places I had visited alone. Each item was deliberate, a marker of intention rather than obligation. I paused at the window again, the paper crane poised like a sentinel. Freedom was not loud or dramatic, it was quiet, deliberate, and undeniable. It existed in my actions, in the reclamation of my time and space, and in the recognition that my value was not contingent on someone else's perception. Evenings became a gentle rhythm, I cooked meals I liked, read novels without interruption, and allowed myself small indulgences without guilt. Seattle's twilight fell softly over the rooftops, and I realized that life's meaning had shifted subtly but irrevocably. The past no longer dictated my emotional landscape, it was a chapter closed, neatly folded, and placed somewhere safe in my mind, just as the crane on the windowsill caught the light without motion, a quiet witness to my choice to live fully. I had learned that attention to oneself, respect for boundaries, and the courage to embrace solitude were not merely survival tactics, they were the foundation for a life worth living.